Hi all, recall from the last video our sad conclusion about poverty and inequality in the world. It seemed that for most poor countries, there was no clear-cut economic system or set of policies that could guarantee rapid and sustained growth. And that in fact, the root causes of their poverty were so deeply embedded in long ago historical processes and critical junctures that reversing their fortunes now seemed all but impossible. But we also realize countries that are rich today generally became rich, at least in part, by way of colonial extraction, or in other words, by robbing the present and future wealth of today's poor countries. And this left us with a big question for today's video. Do rich countries owe it to poor countries to help them escape their poverty and develop economically? Now, a disclaimer, my own inclination is to answer this question with an immediate and resounding yes. But I'll also be the first to admit, it is actually really complicated. And it is complicated on two entirely separate dimensions, an ethical dimension and a practical one. Now, ethically, we have to understand that particularly in the democratic world, national leaders are beholden first and foremost to their national constituencies and not to the people that live halfway around the world and pertain to different national communities altogether. And if we still have serious problems of poverty and inequality within our own national community, what right does an elected official have here in taking our tax money and giving it out to foreign countries that in no way contributed to getting them elected? On the other hand, this ethical problem, sometimes referred to as national responsibility, could be offset if our national community felt that we had a global responsibility to help anyone in need around the world no matter what. Now, in some sense, we can measure how much we actually embrace this idea of global responsibility by comparatively looking at how much different countries spend on aid. Now, take a look at this graph. It shows that in 2015, the United States spent by far the most of any country on foreign development aid, over $30 billion. Now, this indicated both American generosity and the idea that America was committed to global responsibility. However, if we look at this graph, which shows the percentage of total gross national income that countries set aside for foreign aid, well, the United States no longer even appears on the top 10 list of donors. Perhaps we were not so generous after all. Nevertheless, let's say we all can agree that it is a good idea ethically to help the world's poor. At this point, all we really need to do then is figure out how to help them. Now, if you recall from the assigned chapter in Poor Economics, authored by the economist Abhijit Banjari and Esther Duflo, the first challenge is to figure out whether or not there exists a so-called poverty trap. Because if it does, it means that some kind and some amount of foreign aid might be the necessary boost in order to pull poor countries out of that poverty trap zone. Real quick, this is how the poverty trap works, by the way. Look here. The x-axis represents how much money you make right now. The y-axis represents your expected income in the future. In the ideal situation, your income today is going to be enough that you can save a bit to deal with emergency situations and invest a bit in whatever might make your wealth grow over time, like, for example, getting a college education or buying a home. However, where there is a poverty trap, your income might be too low to save or invest in anything, so what you end up doing is spending all of your money just on survival. Moreover, when you're poor, borrowing money gets more expensive because banks see you as more high risk, so they up the interest rates. And then you waste money on rent too. You don't own your own home. Well, then the cops, they pull you over more and give you more tickets because you have to live in neighborhoods where they patrol more and you can't afford to fix your taillight. Well, then you lose your car because you can't make your payments, and then you lose your job because you can't get there anymore. And you see where this is going. As time goes on, being poor makes you more poor. You just find yourself getting poorer and poorer no matter how hard or smart you work. That is, in essence, the poverty trap. Now, at the country level, it works in a very similar way. In a poor country, the government may not have enough money to invest in education, healthcare, or infrastructure. And this means that the population is going to be less educated, innovative, and less productive overall. And the economy is going to grow too slowly to produce the savings necessary to withstand the economic ups and downs that are typical of the market, or to convince international lending agencies to give them low interest rates on development loans. At the end of the day, no matter how hard and smart they work, the country is going to be stuck in that rut of poverty. That's the poverty trap. Okay, I don't think we actually need to debate whether or not the poverty trap exists. It almost certainly does. I think we all know that. However, acknowledging this doesn't necessarily mean that foreign aid can actually help countries wiggle their way out of that trap. As it turns out, there is ample evidence suggesting that foreign aid both helps and hurts poor countries, sometimes helping them develop, but just as often perpetuating their poverty and dependence. Likewise, in the scholarly literature on foreign aid, there are two main schools of thought about this. The first, which is personified by the economist Jeffrey Sachs, argues that if you build it, they will come. That is, if we in the rich world provide the means for poor countries to build things like schools and hospitals and commercial infrastructure, well, they will use this aid as a trampoline to launch themselves out of the poverty trap zone and into a new development zone, one characterized by ever-increasing returns on their investment. In other words, they will be able to set themselves on a path of independent and positive economic growth. Now, the other school of thought is personified by the economists William Easterly and Dambisa Moyo. They argue that if you build it, not only will they not come, but they will be corrupted, spoiled, and made dependent by your gift. And they will be left worse off than as if you had never come to help at all. These scholars point to the perpetuation of autocratic regimes that never have to learn to govern effectively because they know that foreign NGOs will help keep their populations from starving without them doing a thing. They also point to the collapse of local economies when you flood them with free stuff. They even point to the sometimes questionable altruism of the foreign aid industry, which generally spends far more of its budget on bureaucratic overhead than it does on actually helping the poor in any direct kind of way. So then, which side do you take in this debate? If, like me, you still think it's right to help the poor around the world, well, what is the best way to go about doing it? I look forward to hearing your insights.
I fly like paper, get high like planes. If you catch me at the border,